Sort of caps off by the game day. As always, we are joined by myself because obviously I'm here, but we got Felipe over there. Felipe, say hello.
What's good?
And our
legend.
favorite guest, the one that's been showing us love for probably the longest.
Actually,
yeah. The fantasy legend, the fantasy god, Faraz of Upper Hand Fantasy. Welcome back to the pod.
Welcome back, bro.
Yeah, man. How's your fantasy leagues going?
It's going okay. You know, not completely out of the playoffs in any of my leagues so far. I really reduced the amount of leagues this year. Like I was
good.
How many? What is the reduction? How many are you in?
I'm in like 8 leagues this year.
Okay, see,
yeah, which is really good compared to like last year. Was like I was at like 17 or 18.
Yeah, I'm glad you're taking care of your mental health, though.
Yeah, I'm trying, dude.
You know
I know
what I
we talked about it before the show. Though. I'm trying my best because that's really what it was. It's like every Tuesday night, I was like, "Whoa, how many waiver wires do I have?"
Bro, nah,
so
you can't
many.
Nah.
That's the problem. Like, I don't mind starts. That's easy, right? Like, boom, like, such a lineup, whatever.
Mhm.
But like waiver wire on Tuesday, it was a lot.
The thing about the waiver wire as well is like, as someone like yourself who's good at fantasy, like even for people like us, you're not going to be 1 or 2 or 3 on the priority of the waiver wire. So you got to add so many different options. Like I know for me,
It's insane.
I'll put like 12 different waiver claims in, so I know I'll get at least one of them.
Yeah.
And even at worst, I'll drop a kicker or a defense just to add someone and be like, all right, I'm going to make a trade this week. But yeah, I'm in 6 leagues right now. So like I can only imagine 8. But even in those 6, being able to have so many different waiver wire ads, it's so hectic. It's so
100%.
hectic.
And you know what? I started off with like, you know, I only want to do maybe 3 or 4, but then you get invited to these leagues with like, you know, maybe some like somebody who has like some following or like, you know, like I'm in a league with Austin Eckler, which is
that's cool.
You know, Matt Harmon has that podcast on Yahoo, whatever. So like, you know, it's just like, I'm not going to say no to that. You know what I mean? So like, I have to do that. You know what I mean?
And how's Eckler doing in that league?
He's doing okay. The one time I did go against him so far this year, he ended up like somebody was out that week on a Thursday night, and he ended up like playing that guy in his you know, in that spot, and he still ended up beating me that week.
Jesus. I was gonna say so Austin Eckler sucks at fantasy football.
No, I mean he pays attention, man. He makes moves, all that, you know. So he's
does he have him in his own league?
No, so Matt Harmon ended up drafting him in that league.
That's
wild.
wild.
I think he would have drafted him if he fell to him for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
Insider trading.
Yeah, right.
Insider trading. Before anything happens, he picks up Josh Kelly. He knows exactly what's going to.
Well, you know what's funny, man? Like that show was like literally where all the reports came from, like when he was going to come back, right? Because he got the injury or whatever. So I literally just watch that show. You'll figure out when he's coming back.
Yes, it's insane. What about you? How are you doing in fantasy?
I'm good. I'm not like y'all, like a billion leagues where I can't do that. It takes away too much time. So I got one main one I focus on. Obviously, when I started playing Dynasty, I was like, man, this redraft shit boring as fuck. So I'm on a Dynasty. I lost this past week, but I'm 5-4. So I'm right in that. I'm in that 7th place and like in really in a good position, you know, to win these next few weeks. Justin Fields coming back, super flex league. So I got Lamar and Fields. But we were kind of talking about it. Like Lamar week after week has been. Like the Ravens are killing teams, but he doesn't have to do too much. Like 0 touchdowns, the rushing games, the you know, the running backs in the backfield doing everything they can, scoring touchdowns and stuff like that. So Lamar's lack of production has been hurting me a little bit recently.
Well, you know what? He does have, you know, a little bit of a tough matchup this week. However, last time he went up against the Browns. I think it's the Browns this week, right?
Yeah.
Last time he went up against the Browns, like almost 30 points.
But it was a DTR game. It's hard to. It was a DTR game.
I don't care
like,
though. I mean, Deshaun hasn't been playing great
like
either.
at the end of the day, like Deshaun, like this week, like I don't even want to put him in my lineup. You know, like this week and for fantasy, like I have him ranked way down this week. And you know, last week one of the touchdowns was just like like this crazy like tip pass to Omari. You know what I mean? Like
he had that like 2 weeks in a row or something.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. So I don't know. I'm a little bit worried about that overall, that Browns offense. Yeah.
I'm starting Deshaun in the league.
Oh, you really?
You know,
nice.
Well, no. Here's why. Okay,
he's gonna be great.
Thank you. I appreciate it. In this league that I really care about, I got a good team. My biggest issue has been quarterback. I lost Justin Fields early on, so I picked up Kyler, and then someone ended up dropping Deshaun Watson. So I was like, okay, someone that can, as we always talk about, someone that like is available on the waiver wire that can improve on where they're ranked right now.
Sure.
Like naturally, that positivity will come. But now it's to the point where it's like Justin Fields is out. I want to start Kyler, but then there's like the thought of like, well, Kyler might take some time to get going.
Are you starting Deshaun over Kyler Murray this week?
I haven't like said it yet, but right now my lineup is Deshaun. However, I do have an offer out, which I will naturally take right now, which is Deshaun and Nico Collins for Patrick Mahomes, which the guy had proposed.
Oh,
so I would do that.
Hell yeah.
The 2 questions I do have for you, and I just thought about it. 2 major players at each position. 2 probably can't be acquired, and the other 2, like you probably can. We'll start with quarterbacks.
Okay.
What would it take to trade for Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson right now? Because those are 2 top 5 quarterbacks that haven't been kind of the top 5 you'd expect. Like it's Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen. But outside of that, what would it take for you to trade for those 2 guys?
I was just thinking about that. And what I would do personally is whenever you're trading for that type of quarterback, you probably need to give a quarterback back also, right?
Yeah.
So 2 guys that have been coming off some big games, CJ Stroud.
Yep.
Dak Prescott, right? Those 2 guys, are they top 5? No. Are they top 5 rest of the season? No. Are they top 8 rest of the season? Still questionable. Top 10, top 12? Sure, maybe, right? Dak, who knows if he's top 12 rest of the season, right? Like, I don't know because he wasn't top 12 early on.
Right.
Things can change. Going up against the Giants this week. Is this really a Dak game? I'm not sure. He didn't have a good game fantasy-wise against the Giants. It was a Tony Pollard game. So, I think packaging up Dak, packaging up CJ Stroud after a ridiculous performance last week, plus a skill position player like a Nico Collins, like a Tank Dell, right? Who went off last week. Because if you're trading away Patrick Mahomes, if you're trading away Lamar Jackson, that means you have a deficiency somewhere, maybe running back or wide receiver, and maybe you have a little bit of a surplus of that, and then you could leverage some good games and then potentially upgrade your quarterback position to one of those guys.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, like we've talked about this so many times that this year more specifically feels super inconsistent all across the board, that most leagues, if the teams that's in first, second, or third place has one of Tyreek, AJ Brown, Christian McCaffrey, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts.
Yeah.
Like those 5 guys, maybe Mostert, but like they have been the most consistent people in fantasy, and everyone else, like you might have a team that's loaded on paper and they might be 500, right? Like, or less, or I guess 9 games. So you can't be 500.
Like you see Jamar Chase,
exactly.
Justin Jefferson, right? Like these guys, like, you might have picked up some losses with these guys on your roster.
There's an 0-9 team in one of my leagues that has Jamar.
Yeah, there you go.
And it's like it's Olave, Jamar, like it's a good.
And imagine
team,
if you took CMC instead, or if you took, one of these other guys, right? Like
it's crazy. Well, we got a lot of people tuning in right now. As a reminder, this is the Week 10 Fantasy Look Ahead episode with Faraz of Upper Hand Fantasy, where we go through a ton of players you could trade for, trade away. We're going to answer a ton of questions, so make sure to drop them below. The majority of this episode is reserved for you to ask your questions. Who can I get for this player? Who should I target? So we will reserve those this time for you. But before we jump into it, I want to ask you, who are 5 players you want to target and 5 players you want to trade away in fantasy heading into week 10 right now? Like, who are the 5 on both sides that you really are like, you know what, I'm going after this person and I'm trying to trade away that person?
Well, that's a lot of pressure, first of all. Okay. But second of all, I think like the first thing that like pops like out of my head right now is Hollywood Brown.
Ooh.
With Kyler Murray coming back. Hollywood was a top 7 wide receiver for fantasy last year without DeAndre Hopkins. In those first 6 weeks, he was the wide receiver 7, right? So now you have Kyler Murray coming back. Apparently, the reports are that Kyler Murray's been super engaged, right? Like he's one of the reasons, like, listen, the Cardinals could just tank, right? But Kyler Murray's coming back. DeAndre Hopkins is not there anymore. There's a clear wide receiver 1 here. Hollywood Brown was pretty damn consistent, with Josh Dobbs, right? And like, if that's going to be the case there, even in tough matchups where you're like, well, I don't know if I want to start Hollywood, he's come through with touchdowns, and at the end of the day, like this is a huge upgrade for this offense with him coming back, James Conner coming back, another guy you could potentially buy low on right now because he was also an RB1 down the stretch last year with Kyler Murray. He was averaging 5 targets. Was it 5 targets or 5 targets per game? And with Josh Dobbs, only 2.5. So he's doubling up that target potential. Not only that, Keontae Ingram was getting a little bit of work, with James Conner early on in the year before he got hurt. But now I think they know who Keontae Ingram is, and he's not going to get shit. Like that's kind of how I feel about it, right? So
you fucked me last week. I will say.
Oh my god. Well, it's your fault. I mean, I don't know.
Well, Damian Pierce, I didn't expect to completely be a DMP, and I didn't have Singletary, so I was like, it was either Jeff Wilson or Keontae Ingram, and I was like, can one of these guys get me some points? Keontae Ingram got me 0.8, and I lost because of that. So.
Dude, unbelievable.
I'll reduce it to 3 though, because 5 I realize is a lot on the spot, and then I want you to be able to chime in whether or not you agree or disagree with some of them.
All right, let me chime in real quick because I just on that. I mean, I love the Hollywood Brown take, and we were talking about this. Was it last week, Adam? We were talking about Kyler, his rapport with Hollywood Brown. I mean, it goes back to college.
Yep.
And so they have that rapport, and it's really cool to see, especially without DeAndre Hopkins. But I just kind of want to stay in that Cardinals offense.
Yeah.
Trey McBride.
100%, man. I'm big on him rest of the season.
Yeah.
I think I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead. I pitched it to you and you caught it. What's up?
I'm a big Trey McBride guy. Like 2-second story from Senior Bowl. Did I tell a story on this podcast already or not?
Oh,
No.
So I was
think so.
we were at the Senior Bowl. By the
Yeah.
way, Senior Bowl just got a huge upgrade, by the way, because
What?
they're
underclassmen,
allowing
right?
underclassmen to join.
Yeah.
So that's
Oh,
gonna be,
hell
it's
yeah.
gonna be lit
Yeah,
next
that's
year. So I
crazy.
cannot wait to go. Anyway,
Let's go
so-
together, bro. Let's get a little
Let's-
we'll fight together.
A house?
Little Airbnb,
Oh, hell yeah,
creator
bro.
house, content creator house.
I like that. That's a good
I
idea.
mean, I'm down.
All right,
do it, let's
bet.
do it. I'm there every year, so let's do that. Anyway, so Trey McBride, he was there obviously 2 years ago. I was doing a lot of interviews, and he was one of my first interviews that I did that week, right?
Mm.
And me and him chopped it up, whatever. We were cool, whatever. We dapped it up. All right, cool. See you never, right? I'll never see you again. So me and my guy Jason Aponte, big shout out to Jason,
Shout out Jason.
who's a big 49ers content creator. We snuck onto the field during the Senior Bowl game.
You dog.
Okay, so we couldn't do that last year because because of people like us, you needed extra credentials to get down there.
Right.
But we were down there, so I was videotaping everything. I had my phone out, whatever.
Yeah.
Trey McBride ends up catching. Like I'm on the sideline on the end zone. Trey McBride ends up catching a touchdown. I have my phone out. He runs up to me because his momentum is taking him
Yeah.
to me. He looks at my phone. He
Gives
goes,
you a
"Let's
kiss?
fucking go." No. I would have preferred that, to be honest with you. Little smooch. And then it was fucking dope. So now because of that, now I'm rooting for him forever.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Because he
bro.
gave me a kiss on the sideline, right? So like now, I'm sorry, no, that's not what happened.
Well, for the sake of the story,
for the sake of
it
the
sounds way
story,
better.
yeah,
Yeah,
whatever,
he
he
gave
gave me
you
a
a
little
kiss.
smooch.
Yeah,
So but yeah, anyway, back to your question. Like there aren't that many tight ends who can command that type of target share the way he did, right?
Yep.
Not only that, before he got the opportunity, before Zach Ertz got hurt, on a per route basis, he was near the top of the league in terms of targets per route run, and he was near the top of the league in terms of PFF grade for tight ends. So he was already doing his thing.
Mhm.
Now going into his second year, I do think that even when Zach Ertz comes back, I do think that he's going to keep that job. The plan was always for him to be the guy.
Yes,
Right.
totally.
So now with Kyler Murray there, Kyler Murray was targeting tight ends last year as well. So I see it being Hollywood Brown, Trey McBride, and James Conner as like the funnel, passing funnel for that offense.
Well, it's funny you say that, and because we'll move to the next one. I see a ton of questions. Keep dropping the questions. We're going to get to the questions right after we answer the top 3 people to target, 3 people to sell. But we were talking about this. If Trey McBride was in this loaded tight end class, he would have been the tight end 1.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No.
You think Kincaid or Laporta or something?
I think it would have still been Kincaid. It would have been Laporta. It would have been definitely his name, Michael Mayer over him for sure.
Oh, I would have.
sure.
McBride at Colorado State was a
He
dog.
was a beast, but he didn't come on until his senior year. Okay. And these other guys, were a little bit. Now he would have went before guys like Musgrave and the other guy that the Green Bay Packers drafted. But I do think that Mayer was a better prospect for sure. I do think that Dalton Kincaid was a better prospect for sure.
I will say this though with Trey McBride. Right now, if you can go try to trade for him or something like that, if you have a hole in your tight end situation, he's coming off not the best game. Now, the other guy might not realize that he played with whoever the fucking quarterback. Well, who was that? The quarterback for the Cardinals last week?
Clayton Tune.
Yeah, right. They don't have to know that part, right?
Yep.
You're like, okay, like he had one good game, like he popped off like a couple weeks ago, and then kind of went back down. Like now is the time to try to go get him if you can somehow. But based off of last week, him not really playing well, this is his production is going to go up with Kyler. Yeah. So we know what McBride can do, and then we know what he can do.
And the good thing
with
is
Kyler.
that he still got the target share last week. Like regardless, it was only like 5 targets, but like they just didn't throw the ball.
Still targets. Yeah. They're still share the targets.
100%.
Who are 2 other people you're targeting this week? Trying to trade for, buy low.
I think Jonathan Taylor is one of them. Last week, a huge shift happened, right? Where we were waiting for like, okay, when is Zach Moss going to be not involved in this offense anymore? Zach Moss has been good. Like he's been efficient. Like he came out of nowhere and just ended up actually being a good running back this year. However, last week was a real shift for Jonathan Taylor, where you're getting. Not only are you getting more carries, more rushing share. I think he had like 75% of the rushing share last week. And on top of that, he's getting like 70% route participation. So he's involved in both aspects of the game. And it was a really down game for him. Yeah. Going to get up against the Panthers, where you would think that he would have an explosion, right? But neither him or Zach Moss were able to be efficient. They really they geared in to like stop the run, right?
So are you saying he's not necessarily like a buy low, but he's a buy because everything was pointing to it being a bigger game in a way?
It was supposed to be a bigger game. Like he ended up putting up fantasy points, right?
I think he had like 17.
Yeah, exactly. Because the receptions and the touchdown. But at the end of the day, like I do think that he's somebody who can be an RB1 rest
Yep.
of the way, maybe
Yeah.
top 7, top 8 guy, where a lot of people aren't viewing him that way,
Yeah.
and they kind of still think that it's a timeshare. If that makes
Right,
sense.
right. We haven't seen his ceiling yet, and his
I think it's
ceiling
coming.
is
I
coming.
think it's coming.
What would you give up quickly? What would you give up for Jonathan Taylor? Like in terms of running backs, obviously, I think Jonathan Taylor feels like a guy you'd have to do a 2-for-1 for because of the ascension and where
Yeah.
it's coming.
Or you can trade a guy like, maybe someone like maybe Kenneth Walker and a piece. Maybe you can trade someone like who's a running back that's kind of coming on a little bit.
Javonte Williams.
Javonte Williams plus a little piece, because Javonte also, by the way, like we have a 1-game sample of him doing something similar to what Jonathan Taylor did, where
we're gonna get into Javonte.
I think he had like 75% of the carries or something like that last week. Well, the week before his bye. So he's potentially moving up.
63% snap share for Javonte.
Yeah.
We have him in our buy lows as well. So we'll get into it. We'll definitely get into that. Who is one last person you are going to try and trade?
David
for?
Montgomery.
Easy. Yeah.
David Montgomery. It's like, there's a lot of talk about Jahmyr Gibbs, right? Potentially making his way into it. And I think that is valid. I think there's no way you play those 2 games and then not, have more of a share of the workload after the bye week, right? There's no way, unless they're crazy, right?
I think they're crazy.
It's
DeAndre Swift.
They're not Arthur Smith, though. They're not Arthur Smith.
Okay, well, that's a good point.
Now, well, here's the thing, though. When Jamal Williams was out for the Lions last year, DeAndre Swift still didn't get the full workload like Jahmyr Gibbs did, right? So, at least they trust him way more to handle a huge workload.
Yeah.
And with that workload, he did his thing. So, David Montgomery, I do think at the very least, maybe his rushing share reduces by like 20%, but it's never been about that, right? It's he still can get 17 to 20 carries and still be the primary goal line guy, right? Or actually the only goal line guy for them.
Totally.
So moving forward, even though I think that a lot of people think that Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be extremely involved, I think he's going to be more involved. However, David Montgomery is somebody who, with all that talk, I want to kind of sneak in and buy him right now.
I think Gibbs actually, flip it as well, could be on the sell high list just because of the perceived value of Gibbs versus David Montgomery. David Montgomery's not going anywhere.
I don't think so.
3 guys you're trading away before we jump into some questions. There's a ton of questions. Keep submitting them. We see them all. We are going to get to all of them. 156 people on TikTok right now, over 25 on YouTube. Not what it was last time, but we're increasing. Shout out Toe, shout out Kyle Saunders, shout out Alex Graciana. We see all you guys. Keep asking your questions. 3 guys you are trading away in fantasy right now.
I think Gus Edwards is probably one of the most obvious ones, right?
Yeah.
He's RB1 since week 7.
Yeah, exactly.
That's crazy.
It's OD,
What
right?
are we doing?
And it's like, I had him on my sell list like 2 weeks, like before this past week, and then he ends up scoring 2 touchdowns. But he only had 5 carries, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So it's like Keaton Mitchell's coming on a little bit. Like,
oh yeah, he looked
like
good.
I had him on my sell list 2 weeks ago. And now now Keaton Mitchell's coming on now too. So it's like, Justice Hill led in snap share. So this can go in any direction. Now, I think he's still going to be their goal line guy because Keaton Mitchell is like a Jaleel McLaughlin type of guy, like smaller stature.
Right.
But listen, he scored, I think, 6 touchdowns in the last 3 weeks.
Yep.
It's not going to continue. A huge touchdown regression. Touchdown regression doesn't always hit. It only hits when the volume isn't matching that production, right? And in this case, it's not going to match.
I also
that
think
production.
Lamar's going to have some of those touchdowns as well.
Those touchdowns are going to shift.
Yeah, it's not going to all be on.
Which is why you should be buying Lamar, like you mentioned earlier,
correct?
Right? Like that's one of the big.
Which I did last week.
Yeah,
shameless plug. Who are 2 other people that you are trying to trade away right now?
Man, it's tough, man. It's tough to trade away. I think it's much harder to identify guys you're trading away. I think Najee Harris had a decent 3 weeks here since his bye, and in PPR, double-digit fantasy points 3 weeks in a row. That's not something you're used to with Najee Harris.
Right.
Now, his role didn't change at all. Okay, so that's something that you look at. His rushing share didn't change. His route participation didn't change. Now, his target share increased by a little bit over the last 3 weeks, but Jalen Warren has been the guy who's been getting those targets. I think it just happened to shift by circumstance more than anything. So obviously, you're not going to be able to just trade him 1-for-1 for anything significant.
Totally.
But you can package him up and just get rid of him, because he's on your. Most likely he's on your bench.
You don't want the headache.
You don't need that roster clogger.
Yeah.
Right. Is what I call him, and maybe you can start him in a pinch, sure, whatever. But I'd rather package him up. Look in your league, who needs a running back? Maybe package him up a little bit and get somebody else.
Totally. You got one more?
I don't know, man. I'm just trying.
I got one. I have one that, and I'll throw out your thoughts because this was part of my Lamar deal last week. Alvin Kamara, usage trending down. Is Alvin Kamara? I don't want to say. Let me preface this.
Please.
I don't want to sell him. I don't want to sell Alvin Kamara. But do I think you can sell Alvin Kamara? Yes. So I'd ask both of you guys, is Alvin Kamara considered a sell high right now?
You first.
I mean, yeah, because we've been seeing the targets and everything. Like you said, like it's not someone I'm looking to trade necessarily.
Right.
But if I need more depth somewhere else, if I need receiver help, I think that's somebody who you can use his recent production. And he's been putting up points. He's been getting it. And I know Taysom Hill vultured him a little bit. That's not going to continue to happen on a consistent basis, I don't think. We've seen the highs for Alvin Kamara this year after he's come back from injury or from suspension, I guess. And I think you can sell that, right? I think you can sell that and try to go get a couple pieces or a receiver if you kind of need that. But if I can't trade him, I think you're going to be getting solid production for him. And he's a set and forget, really, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
His rushing share has decreased below 50% last 2 weeks.
Okay.
Not great. Not only that, he's been super inefficient. And whenever I talk about this, people get really mad at me because like they have Kamara.
Yeah, what the fuck, bro?
And they're like, yeah, they're just like, yo, shut the fuck up. Like, this is not, it's gonna be fine. It's gonna someone in my comments was like, yo, dude, like it really doesn't matter. And I'm like, okay, well, you can pretend like these things don't matter, but like at the end of the day, the production is gonna catch up to utilization.
Totally.
Right? It's gonna happen
Absolutely.
at some point. So we can't just just put our head in the sand and think that things aren't going to change. Taysom Hill had more carries than him last week.
Yep.
Jamal Williams had a bunch of snaps last week. Now, he didn't get the touches, but things can shift from Taysom Hill to Jamal Williams at some point. So, like this is not what you want to see. The route participation was below 50% last week. So the targets weren't there. Like, why? This was a situation. It's not like it's not like they were out of the game or anything like that, where they just took him off the field. They just wanted to have other guys involved. Like, why is Taysom Hill getting more carries than Alvin Kamara? Because they like him more, and he was more efficient. Like, straight up.
Yeah.
it's annoying because me and you are a big Alvin Kamara guy. So
but here's the thing.
Me too, though.
But here's what I would say. I traded Alvin Kamara.
Yeah.
Like, I would sell Alvin Kamara because he is one of two running backs, in my opinion, in fantasy right now that has the highest value. Him and CMC, in my opinion.
Right.
And so I think what you can get for Alvin Kamara, I still think he finishes as an overall RB1, maybe on the lower end of
100%,
things.
100%.
And his value is tied very much to his receptions. And I still think he will be there.
Yeah. I have him ranked as a top 5 running back this week.
Yeah, he's going to be fine. But if I could trade Kamara and someone and get back Pollard and someone else, which is exactly what I did to get Lamar because I needed a quarterback, I'm going to do it. Because I think Pollard is someone, and we're going to get into this, the buy low sell high idea for me, and I think for both of us, is predicated on their value right now and can they return on that value.
Sure.
So no matter what, if Tony Pollard's right here in like this low end RB2, potential RB3 category, no matter what, I do think better days are ahead for him. So he's going to come there. We said it with Javonte Williams. We said it with Aaron Jones. I still think it with Bijan Robinson. Like, their values here, they can return on that.
Yeah.
So Alvin Kamara is someone that the value's here, and I think where he's going to return is probably right here on the lower end. And that's only why.
When he was getting like 14 targets a game, like maybe you just think that he's not going to break records this year at his age, right? Like, it's probably not going to happen,
right?
Especially if he wasn't efficient doing it on top of that. So how are you going to get 14 catches and like 45 yards?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, that is not indicative of something that's going to continue. Do you think that they want to feed him in the receiving game? No, because it's not an efficient way to spend plays.
NFL guy, we're going to jump into some questions. By the way, that was great. That was good 3 options on buy low and sell high. Those are some good ones. By the way, NFL guy on TikTok, and this is a good example of what we were talking about before, says Kamara does not have the same value as CMC LMAOO.
Yeah, I was going to question you on that comment.
I'll tell you, because Alvin Kamara, since he's come back from suspension, has been one of the best running backs in fantasy. So CMC is obviously up here, but I didn't say value-wise. I said they've been the 2 best running backs in fantasy.
If I'm not mistaken, Kamara has outscored Alvin Kamara.
He has.
On a points per
we
game
did a top 5
last,
running backs.
Over the last
So I think CMC might have the name value, but Alvin Kamara and CMC have been the 2 of the best running backs in fantasy since Alvin Kamara's come back. So yes, I do think, like, I don't think you're going to trade CMC, but I think you can get a similar return if you're trading Alvin Kamara.
I mean, you trade Alvin Kamara, add a good wide receiver, then get CMC. Like, you could do that because somebody who has Christian McCaffrey, who has a few losses, might need a receiver.
Here's a good question, which also comes from NFL guy. Talking about Tyreek Hill and trading Tyreek Hill away. And I'll add a little bit of a different question in there because I think it's an interesting one. What would it take to trade away 2 of the best wide receivers in fantasy right now? That's Tyreek Hill and A.J. Brown. What would you need in return from both you
Selling
guys.
one of
If
these
you
guys?
if you had AJ Brown or Tyreek Hill, what would you need in return, and what can you actually realistically get for them if you were going to trade those guys away?
I would take let's say like a Devon A-Chain, right? A running back who doesn't necessarily have that value right now that he could have in a few weeks, meaning that it's a lot, his perceived value right now is a lot lower than what his value can be in a few weeks, plus an Amon-Ra St. Brown, maybe. Right. Something like that. Right. And I would only do that if I'm losing. I would only do that if I need a running back. Right. Otherwise, I'm just riding Tyreek, right? Because I want these players who could just break fantasy, and I want these players who could just do their thing like that. So, like, that's kind of what I'm thinking. The other way around, like, if I'm giving away Tyreek or AJ Brown, I would need like some sort of RB1, right? So let's say, I would say Alvin Kamara probably has less value than both of those guys, perceived value at least, and actual value. So maybe an Alvin Kamara plus say Nico Collins or someone like that who can have that ceiling every single week. It's funny how Nico Collins appears in every single buy sell show ever.
Literally.
He's probably the most traded guy like this.
I traded.
You just traded him?
Part of that trade. Exactly. I also have him on my sell high list.
He's been in all my trades.
He's right there. He's like, if you look on one website,
because it's like you would buy him and sell him.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Like he has value.
Well, he's still a top 24 receiver this year, and yet he's been wildly inconsistent.
Yeah.
What are you saying? What would you need?
I think it's the first thing you said. You kind of, if you're going to get rid of one of these super high-end game breaker wide receiver ones, right, then I still want a wide receiver one. Yes. It's not necessarily a game breaker. So Amon-Ra St. Brown is a good one. I think another good one who's been really trending up lately. I know I've seen some posts for you. You've been saying sell CD, but we've seen him really trending in the right direction.
Why'd you have to bring that up?
I'm a big follower, bro. I'm a big follower.
I'm just curious why you have to bring that up. I mean, it's a sensitive subject for me.
I'm so sorry, man. So sorry. So somebody like that, right? Like Amon-Ra, CD, like somebody who we know is going to finish in the wide receiver one conversation, and then get a running back. And I like HN because like perceived value lower right now, right? Yep. And we know what he was doing when he was healthy.
Yep.
And he's going to come back, and that he's going to pop off.
David Montgomery's another one.
Montgomery,
like a similar situation, right? Where you kind of like know that the production is almost guaranteed with David Montgomery. To be honest with you, you get David Montgomery plus, and maybe not an Amon-Ra because they're in the same team, but maybe someone like CD or someone who is in that wide receiver, lower end wide receiver one fringe area.
Absolutely. It's funny. Another guy too. We were just talking about, not to even bring up two Cowboys. It shows I'm a Cowboy fan, but like Pollard's value is low right now.
Totally
so like,
agree with you.
One of these guys that has him would probably be willing to get rid of him. And so look at that.
How you feel about Tony Pollard? That was you had Tony Pollard as someone that was going to finish as the overall.
Yeah, actually, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about it because we've been saying, I think, for 5 weeks now, buy low on Tony Pollard.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Tony Pollard?
Tony Pollard was on my buy low list like week 4, week 5 or something like that. I've calmed down on that since because he just hasn't been good. Like in terms of efficiency wise.
Yeah, efficiency is the biggest thing.
That sort of thing. Like it's been low. Like it's been bad. It hasn't just been not good. It's just been bad.
The schedule's been tough. Like
schedule's been tough.
Game scripts haven't been favorable.
See, that's the thing, right? The game scripts and the schedules have been the weirdest thing for Tony Pollard.
I agree with you.
It's one of the weirdest things I've ever seen in terms of like because when they're completely out of it, they'll bring in Rico Dowdle.
Yeah,
right in the fourth quarter. The Jets game is when he had the most volume. Why? Because it was a close game.
Yeah.
Right. And then but Dowdle ended up coming in. They ended up like probably rushing the ball like 45 times in that game because they weren't going to do anything else. They were going to win the game. So this week against the Giants, right? This is like the litmus test for me.
I totally agree.
Right? Where it's like, all right, well, this is probably not a Dak game, right? They're going to want to run the ball. Mm-hmm. They don't need to pass the ball because the Giants aren't going to be able to score points. So now what happens? Are they going to go up quick, 21-0 in the first half? Probably not. This is a division game. If the game stays within 10 points or so in the first half, I need to see 15 touches for Pollard.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I think he'll get it.
And in the first half. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's really what it comes down to for me. And if he doesn't do that this week, he doesn't come through this week. He had 2 touchdowns against the Giants week 1, and then since I don't know if has he scored since then?
I don't think he scored since week 1. At least you said that, and I've been following that.
Absolutely insane, right? So that's really what it comes down to. Can he come through at the end of the year? I hope so, because his role is one of the better roles in the NFL. He just hasn't gotten the touches.
Yeah, I mean, I've been frustrated by this.
I've been frustrated too, but here's the silver lining.
What?
First 8 weeks of last year, he averaged 12.2 fantasy points. First 8 weeks this year, he averaged 12.3 fantasy points. He finished as a top 5 running back over the last half of the season last year. I think he will do it this year. The schedule is better. Also, he had a touchdown call back against the Eagles. Like that was a fucking touchdown.
It wasn't the only one. He had a couple touchdowns called back.
So I just think
again, yes, I love that outlook because it's like, all right, rest of the season can completely change how we look at this guy in terms of the whole year. But it's different. He's being utilized different than this year than he was last year. And I think what you say is is perfect. It's just like it's one of the weird situations where like the game script is never really in his favor. They're blowing out a team. Typically, Derrick Henry, like the Titans are blowing out a team. Like
they're gonna run him.
He's gonna have a 25-point game.
Mhm.
Tony Pollard now isn't even getting carries.
I know.
And so, like, when is he gonna get his touches? And when he does get his touches, you watch him this year, and I've been watching. It's not efficient. It's so many 1-yard gains, like getting stopped at the line. You can see that the usage he got last year, the type of usage he was getting, was definitely beneficial to his overall production. And this year, it's just not the same.
It's weird how they run him like inside, like all the time. It's just like, can we get some off tackle stuff?
Which is what he was doing last year. Like, so treat him like a utility piece, like he was last year. Just do it more, right?
Yeah, don't run him up the middle like you were Zeke. You know, like do something a little different.
Spoken like two guys that are super frustrated with Tony Pollard. Let's go into some questions on TikTok and YouTube. Timmy Pip said Raheem Mostert and Amari Cooper for Amon-Ra full PPR. Which side do you prefer?
So Raheem Mostert and
Amari Cooper for Amon-Ra full PPR.
I am definitely on the Amon-Ra side. I'm with it because now that's if you want to upgrade. Now, if one of those guys, if you're replacing one of those guys with someone on your bench and your flex, for example, and then I'm with it, right? Because I'm always about the 2-for-1s if it makes your team better.
Yep.
Yeah.
I want that better player, right?
Totally.
Who's going to come through every single week.
Totally.
You know, with Amari, like, you know, he's going to be good, but he's going to be a little inconsistent with Deshaun.
I think a lot of questions, as I'm seeing all across the board, is about Devontae Adams. One specific question by Papi Chulo.
Oh, we like Papi Chulo.
Someone wants me to trade either Jordan Addison or Cooper Kupp for Devontae Adams. So we'll first answer that question, and then you can go into what are your thoughts on Devontae Adams. But would you take Jordan Addison or Cooper Kupp for Devontae Adams?
Or?
Like, would you take either one of those guys? Would you be willing to trade Devontae Adams and get one of those guys?
Well,
short answer for me would be no, but
Cooper Kupp and Jordan Addison are in like two different universes.
Completely.
Yeah.
Okay. Like Cooper Kupp, in my opinion, I'd rather have Cooper Kupp rest of the season than Devontae Adams. And I don't think it's close. I think Matthew Stafford, it seems like Matthew Stafford is going to be back
after the bye
in week 11. That's the hope. So yeah, I'd rather have Cooper Kupp. I think he's going to be a clear wide receiver 1. Devontae Adams, I think, is going to be more behind wide receiver 2 the rest of the season. And then Jordan Addison, more of a mid wide receiver 3 at best, I would say.
Right.
With Justin Jefferson hopefully coming back next week and Josh Dobbs as quarterback.
Yeah, I'll take Kupp. I mean, we know the volume Kupp gets with Stafford and LA.
Yeah.
Again, like Devontae Adams situation, it's his situation. It's not him. And so because of that, Kupp is just way more valuable. I would say.
See, I'll be the one that goes against the norm here. I think I still might take Devontae. And the reason I feel that is like he still had 7 total targets. He had 1 in the first half, but it's very, very clear that is a completely different locker room. Like with Antonio Pierce as the head coach. So
and he got a 30% target share.
I think
So they didn't throw a whole lot. They didn't need you last week.
The day, like, he's going to have a blow up game. I don't know when it's going to come, but he's going to have a blow up game. And I think I would put him in the buy low category.
He's a buy low for sure.
He's a buy low, but that's why I wouldn't sell him that low. Now, granted, Cooper Kupp for Devontae, I think is fair. I think Cooper Kupp is obviously still an elite wide receiver who just hasn't performed. So very similar to Devontae, but I think better days are ahead for Devontae Adams. I really do.
I think that Cooper Kupp has a chance to re-cement himself as a top 3 or 4 wide receiver fantasy.
Yep.
I don't think Devontae Adams can get close the rest of the year.
It's just Asher on TikTok said, what should I do with Raheem Mostert and Nico Collins? I have Isaiah Pacheco.
Okay. I mean, listen, it really comes down to what you need. Are any of these guys on your bench? If you can do a 2-for-1, sure. Like, package those guys up. Now, here's the thing, right? Like Nico Collins, Raheem Mostert, they're not coming off like the biggest games in the world, right? Like they're coming off modest games. They both had a touchdown last week. So for me personally, when I'm trading Raheem Mostert right now, everyone's looking at Devon Achane coming back. They're looking at like not so great games from Raheem Mostert. He's not 100% either. I'm probably holding these guys personally.
I think you have to.
Because they're not coming off these blow up games, right? So I think Nico Collins is still the number 1 wide receiver for Houston. I do think so. If you ask me, like, who's going to have the best rest of the season between him and Tank Dell and, Noah Brown, right?
Yeah.
Like it's Nico Collins for me,
Yeah.
right? So
But I think it's closer than people think. The Nico
100%.
Tank, yeah.
Nico Tank, listen, they're basically alternating between like 25 to 30% target shares, right? Like,
That's crazy.
but it's going to normalize at some point where both of these guys are going to be averaging between 20 and 25% target share.
You got any thoughts to that? We've talked about Raheem Mostert, like in terms of what you do with Mostert.
Yeah,
I think Mostert's one of those guys that's been to sell high for the entire season, but every single person knows he's 31 with an injury history with Achane and Jeff Wilson, who hasn't done anything, but Achane and Jeff Wilson, who are also there. No one wants to trade for Raheem Mostert. Everyone is afraid of that
backfield. Which is
backfield,
fine for you.
which
Like,
is fine. Hold on to him.
Production.
I think no matter what, whether it's the health or anything, he will always remain, even on the low end RB2. I don't think he'll drop below that. He's going to get touches.
He's going to be startable every single week for the rest of the season.
Exactly. As long as he's healthy. I totally agree with that. Alex Graciani said, my panic level is at an 8 for Bijan. They aren't utilizing him at all. We did our panic meter on Tuesday. Bijan was there. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much are you panicking on Bijan Robinson?
6. I would say around a 6.
What did we have him at? I think we had him at like a 7 or 8.
Yeah.
Okay.
Solely if this is the usage for the rest of the season.
Yeah. Listen, man, like, Bijan, Arthur Smith went on like a 6-minute rant yesterday.
That was.
Did
you see that video?
I didn't watch it.
Oh my God.
He did that on like why Tyler Algier is involved, right?
It was the best example to interrupt. It was, and Jack and Kondo were saying it. It's like exactly when you were in school and someone would ask you a question, the teacher would ask you a question, and you didn't know the answer, but you just rambled and tried to find a way to finish the
100%.
answer.
It was a ramble.
The question was, why isn't Bijan getting usage inside the red zone or inside the goal line? And he went on a whole rant as to circumstances. They've had 28 trips in the red zone. They've only converted 14. There's been all these circumstances like zone reads between fucking Desmond Ridder and Bijan, and Desmond Ridder would keep it. Like it was very stupid.
Really
Continue.
stupid.
Sorry,
it's up to him to like figure out who gets the ball. Like it doesn't make any sense. 3.25 yards after contact per attempt. That's third for Bijan in the NFL compared to 13th for Tyler Algier. He's second in missed tackles forced per attempt compared to Tyler Algier's 17th in the NFL. He's yards per carry. Bijan is second in the NFL compared to Tyler Algier, 3.2. He's 23rd in the NFL. Okay, so like it's really obvious that he's better.
Right.
Arthur Smith, if he doesn't really look at it and like start giving him more touches, he's gonna get fired.
I totally agree with you.
And that's really what it comes down to me. So I'm buying Bijan Robinson. I'm holding Bijan Robinson. I'm not selling him right now. Literally this week is the worst time to sell Bijan Robinson.
Yeah.
Because like
I'm trying to buy him.
I feel like the world is like falling.
And
like
all the
Bijan
drama
Robinson.
around the situation.
All the drama. Like just don't even like, and listen, they're going up against Arizona this week. Like Bijan can go off.
I'm trying
Bijan about to just drop
I'm trying to buy it. Don't say anything. I'm trying to buy across the board for Bijan. I think and again, another example of a guy whose value is so low and naturally is going to return on that investment. Juicy schedule in the playoffs, juicy schedule coming up. The question then for you would be, what would it take to get Bijan Robinson now?
Not a lot, isn't it? It's not going to take a lot to get him, man. Like, I think that people who are trading away Bijan need a running back, right?
So Javonte Williams, someone that's ascending, or because I think that's a fair someone who's ascending, but you don't know what to make of it. Someone who's descending, but you think he's going to return there.
I would give Javonte Williams plus a little bit for Bijan, right?
Yeah.
Because Bijan is like a talent. He's a superstar,
insane.
right?
Ceiling
Like
is crazy.
superstar. Not only that, his route participation, dude. Like he's running. I think he's number 1 in route participation, if not mistaken. It's like Christian McCaffrey, Rashad White, and him are top 3 in route participation. So it's like he just needs the targets too.
Right.
And he's not getting targets, which makes no sense. How he makes behind the back catches, he makes like these acrobatic wide receiver catches. Like, why aren't you getting him the ball more? So I do think that there's going to be a situation where that happens. Here's the thing, like, college players, like, they're not used to this long ass season, like 17-game season.
Right.
My hope is that that's part of the reason why they have limited his touches. They haven't said that, but I'm hoping that's why. And I'm hoping that towards the end of the year, to really make these last several games count, I think they're going to potentially unleash him at some point. I do think it's going to happen at some point. And the fact that it's taken this long sucks, but I do think he's going to have a much, much better rest of the season than he's had over the last 6 or 7 weeks.
I agree. And
we got to believe that, man.
I think you nailed it on the head also. If Arthur Smith wants to retain his job, he's going to have to give Bijan the rock. This is a natural correlation. Arthur Blank as an owner is not an idiot. Like
No,
he's built
yeah.
a team that's gone to a Super Bowl. So like he
Yeah.
understands that.
And
you
this
want
is
to
a
draft this
team,
guy.
by the way,
This is a talented team.
this is a very talented young roster.
Yeah.
Really good. So it's like they need to get a head coach who's going to take that talent and make them good.
And get Justin Fields.
And or Kyler Murray. Question for you though, because we talked about Jonathan Taylor earlier on. Who would you prefer to trade for, Bijan or Jonathan Taylor? Bijan's value obviously lower. Jonathan's a little higher. Who would you prefer to trade for?
I would prefer to trade for Jonathan Taylor, more sure of a thing to become an RB1. And I don't think it's going to take a whole lot to get JT either, because at least right now, because right now there is still that feeling that, and there hasn't been a lot of noise around it, where there was a clear utilization shift this past week. That we just nobody really talking about. Why? Because he hasn't had the points that fantasy points that came out of last week wasn't a whole lot.
Right.
He also disappointed in what should have been a blow up game
Totally.
against Carolina. So I'd rather trade for Jonathan Taylor because the utilization is exactly what we want Bijan's to be already.
Question for both of you guys. This is from applesauce.com. Shout out applesauce. Not a fan of it though, but by the way, you like applesauce?
I like applesauce.
My
You guys
kids
like applesauce?
love applesauce. My kids
So
love
good.
applesauce. I don't like applesauce.
Not a
Oh,
fan.
come on.
Prefer the apple, not the sauce
Do
part.
you like other baby food too, or just applesauce?
Yeah.
Just applesauce.
Applesauce.com said, do I trade Kyler Murray coming off IR knowing I need a quarterback with Kirk Cousins done for the year? So I guess the question for me would be, what are you doing with Kyler Murray?
Well, I don't think you can really trade him right now for much. Like,
I disagree. I think there's actually perceived value on Kyler Murray.
uh,
I don't know about
Not that I
like,
know
I'm not
of.
talking about like top 5 quarterback potential, but I do think Kyler Murray is someone that, because here's why. I think the norm when it comes to a trade is someone goes right to Twitter or Google and types in their name and they read the first few things. A majority of the things they're going to say with Kyler Murray, he's been looking good. He's been connected with Marquise Brown. He's been connected with Trey McBride in practice. Like he could have went a week ago and they didn't. Like there's going to be good positive things about Kyler. So
my hesitation with Kyler though is that he's very strong as a fantasy quarterback, and I know he's a good passer and everything like that too. But his rushing ability just brings him up a lot, and
Yeah.
I don't know coming off of the injury how good he's going to look in that area of the field or in that part of the game. And so I don't know if like,
So are
I
you
don't know his
trading him
value.
away though? But that's the thing. Would you trade him away? I don't know what you're getting because he doesn't have Kirk Cousins anymore. But based off of what you're saying, you're
I
kind
would
of.
kind of hold and see what he's got, and then start him if he's good.
But I think Kyler's going to take 2 or 3 weeks before we see the actual Kyler that we know. I don't think he's going to come out this week and have.
Yeah, but I guess like, okay, if someone is thinking that Kyler's going to be awesome and he's willing to trade for him and give you some good pieces that you need, then absolutely. But I don't think that's happening, so I would rather hold on to him.
That's kind of how I feel too. Like I don't have much to add there. Like if there is, you got to kind of gauge your league. I don't think there's a perceived like notion where like Kyler's just going to come in and just absolutely kill it. If there was, then I would take advantage of that.
Yeah.
And if some league mates believe that, listen, like if you don't have a quarterback and like you lost Kirk Cousins and you don't really have anybody to start, you've been streaming, I would keep Kyler and like look at that as like a godsend. Like, oh, like I
Exactly.
got Kyler. Like I hopefully I should be good moving forward. Now, can you move Kyler with a piece for Lamar? Can you move Kyler with a running back or wide receiver for Mahomes, whatever? Sure, whatever. Like I would rather do that, I think. But it really depends on how people are viewing Kyler. If they're viewing him as like this lock and loaded every single week starter.
Another question just came in on top of this: is Kyler Murray or Justin Fields rest of season?
That's a good question. I'm thinking Fields.
Me too. I mean, Fields has just shown that ceiling over the past few weeks before he got hurt. So yeah,
that floor.
Yeah, but he started to get right. Just like last year,
I'm okay
he
with the
started
floor.
to get right.
I'm okay with the floor is 0. I am
Justin Fields has lost me weeks specifically because of that floor.
I'm willing to chase that championship, right?
Okay.
So it's like
Fuck yeah.
you got to do what you got
Yo,
to
that's
do.
the attitude.
Yeah, you got to go for it, right? Like with Justin Fields, like he could win you your championship, opposed to Kyler Murray, or we're talking about Kyler Murray,
Yeah.
opposed to Kyler Murray, where he's just like he'll get you by.
Totally. We're going to begin wrapping up. So keep submitting those trade questions. We'll take a few more. As a reminder, we're doing our buy low, sell high episode with Faraz of Upper Hand Fantasy. If you're not following Faraz on Instagram, make sure to go check him out. I was going to say tune him out, but that doesn't make any sense. Make sure to go check him out. There's a lot of people on TikTok right now. A lot of people on TikTok also have Instagram. Faraz does amazing stuff. We were talking about it off the pod. Your trade bait, your trade targets, your moves you're making today. So make sure to check out Faraz and all of his stuff. Here's a good question by Massey Aleva on TikTok. Said, Derrick Henry or Devon Achane rest of season?
I'll go again. Similar thing here, right? Very similar to what you just asked, actually, with the Kyler Murray, Justin Fields thing, where it's like Devon A-Chain, what's his floor is lower than Derrick Henry, right? But his ceiling is higher,
right?
He's just like the explosive ability is just ridiculous in that particular rushing environment in a better offense. I'm gonna go with that. Like Will Levis is starting rest of the season now. Like he looked good, but like what does that look like in a larger sample, right?
Yeah.
So you a little bit of risk there. I do like Derrick Henry's schedule, but the upside with A-Chain is just absolutely bonkers. So I'm gonna go A-Chain.
I'll take Henry. I'm a little biased because I have Henry, but I'm just going with Henry. Yes, the upside for A-Chain is insane, and we saw it in those couple weeks. But Henry, I saw a stat yesterday. It's like one of those advanced analytics for running backs and efficiency and stuff like that. Like obviously, like you got guys like Mostert way on the end.
Right.
Derrick Henry's efficiency is one of the highest for running backs still. And so now that Will Levis is coming in and the defense is actually they're being forced to open up a little bit and not just have 8 in the box, I think Henry has brighter days ahead. And I would rather go with the consistency from him.
I would actually agree, especially as a Dolphins fan. I think Derrick Henry, just the floor. We were talking about this in fantasy right now. There's just been such a lack of consistency. Most of these teams that are above 500 usually have some consistent piece on their team. HN, I think, can be that guy, but we saw 4 games of it, 3-5 games of it. Like the efficiency naturally is going to regress. So I think that's a good one. A few more. Brendan Holt said, thoughts on DeAndre Swift?
He's another person. He's another player I want to buy right now because he's getting like the rushing share is there, like above 75% for several games over the past few weeks. But he's on a great offense. And yes, that tush push is going to be there, but they've gotten the ball a ton on the 1 yard line here. Okay. Swift is going to be scoring more touchdowns soon. He's very involved in the receiving game. Listen, for all the people who said like Jalen Hurts will not target DeAndre Swift in the receiving game, you were wrong, because what ends up happening with running backs who demand targets, Swift is one of those guys. And we have a scrambling quarterback who's targeting a very good receiving running back. We saw with Cam Newton and CMC. We're going to continue to see it with these type of guys. So I think I like Swift, man. I think he's an RB1 rest of season. I think he's going to be consistent, and he has a little bit of a ceiling that we haven't seen yet for a few weeks.
I'm stick with that.
We'll do 2 more questions. A lot of questions have come in about James Conner, and I think you were talking about him on your podcast as well. So we'll go into James Conner. Michael Given said, should I start James Conner? The next question after that was by Victor Arredondo, who said, what are your thoughts on James Conner? So James Conner.
I have him as like a mid RB2 this week. I think he's solid start. If he goes, play him. Right, like I mentioned earlier, like with Kyler Murray, he was averaging 5 targets a game. With Josh Dobbs, he was averaging 2.5 targets a game.
Big difference,
so it's like it's double. Like there's I think he's going to get a huge share of the workload. Like they have no other running backs there who's worth giving one touch to per game. Even when he comes off the field, it's better to just pass the ball until he's ready. Like there's no other running backs there. So in my opinion, like, I would go buy James Conner if I can, start him as an RB2 every single week, and he has an RB1 upside. Like before, like
last year in the playoffs,
even earlier this year, he was getting it done in tough matchups. So, this offensive line, by the way, before he got hurt, this offensive line was like number 1 or number 2 in yards before contact per attempt. Damn. So, and he was playing well too. He was like top 10 in yards after contact per attempt as well. So it's one of those situations where you have a good offensive line who's performing in this scheme that they're running. And he's a good running back, and he's involved in both the run and the pass game. High floor, and he's going to give you some RB1 weeks too.
Yeah, I mean, look, James Conner is one of those guys that don't have the sex appeal of these other guys, but consistently produces, bro. Like last year, he was RB1 last year, I believe, wasn't he?
He was RB1 last year,
especially in the fantasy.
But you're not going to hear him in those conversations though, as like, guys that are RB1. So I mean, this offseason, I think we're all pretty high on James Conner, and I'm still high on him.
Yeah,
last
he
question.
Has a sex appeal for me though.
Last question, and I'm gonna feed this to you first because I know how you feel about this, and I think I also know how you feel about this. But this will be our last question. Rey is not a Skywalker, by the way. If you're a Star Wars fan, she is definitely a Skywalker with how she performed late in the playoffs. Okay, you're not a Star Wars guy. Are you a Star Wars guy?
Not at all.
Okay, so then that made 0 sense.
For you, bro.
Big Star Wars person. Whatever. Rey said, "Who should I trade for with Devontae Smith?" He's trying to trade away Devontae Smith.
Don't trade away Devontae Smith.
Start with that.
Don't trade away Devontae Smith. Dallas Goedert likely going on IR. It hasn't been announced yet.
He's gonna go on IR.
Broke his foot. He's gonna go on IR. They have the bye, so they might not even announce it until next week, right? So I would take advantage right now. If you need a couple wins over the next few weeks, go trade for Devontae Smith because the target share went from 23% to 30% in games where Dallas Goedert missed last year.
Yep.
So something to take advantage of. Obviously, AJ Brown's going to still kill it. More than 30% target share, most likely the rest of the way. But Devontae Smith just got to upgrade without Dallas Goedert. If you're selling him now, you're selling him low.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've been saying that, but especially now. I saw that stat too that you said about last year.
Yeah, and not just that. Like one more thing to add. I'm sorry,
Sure.
but like when Dallas Goedert comes back, they also have Arizona in the fantasy championship this week, this year. So even when Goddard comes back, he still has a chance to do his thing in a really good matchup in week.
Correct
17.
me if I'm wrong. This exact scenario kind of happened last year, even though early on it was a little bit better. But Goddard goes down. Devontae Smith finishes as a wide receiver 1 overall.
I mean, Devontae Smith's second half of the year last year was incredible.
He was a wide receiver 1.
Even when Goddard came back, he just kept doing it.
Yeah.
100-yard games, like touchdowns, like he was getting it done.
So moral of the story, do not trade Devontae Smith. Trade for Devontae Smith, if anything, especially if you need wins. My computer has died on me, so that's awesome. But this was fun.
Hell yeah.
I fucking love
Always
doing
good to
this.
have you, bro.
Always a pleasure having you.
I love coming here.
As a reminder, we'll be doing, I saw a lot of start-sit questions. So if you want a start-sit question to be answered, make sure to tune in tonight at 5 p.m. We'll be doing start-sits on TikTok. So make sure to tune into that. Set your reminders as well. You're about to do your podcast, right? Is that airing live or is that?
No, it's not live, but it's going to be up in about maybe an hour and a half.
Okay. So make sure to tune into, go check out, I think it's your Instagram's best probably place to find you.
Yeah. The Upper Hand Fantasy podcast. Right. You can find that on any platform, but yeah, you can follow me on Upper Hand Fantasy on Instagram as well.
Make sure to go check out Faraz. Amazing stuff going on. Also, if you're into DFS in any capacity, make sure to go to thegameday.com/promotions. You're going to find the best DFS offers. But hey, we'll do this again probably in 2 weeks or something.
I'm down.
Right before the trade deadline.
I'm down.
I think most trade deadlines are like November 20, like end of November.
I think it's like the week before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think
like
we're coming up.
week,
But and then tune into our predictions episode, which will drop tomorrow. 4 a.m.
Yep.
All right.
Nice.
And as we end every single fantasy episode, Felipe is going to give us some words of wisdom. Felipe, what are the words of wisdom today?
Damn, bro. I saw a tweet earlier and it was kind of fire. Actually, I saw it on Instagram. I don't know. Follow Faraz on Instagram.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you tomorrow for our predictions episode.
Peace.
Take it easy.